So after almost a year of announcing FSR3 to Cyberpunk 2077, the magic update has finally arrived. And it sucks. As of today, I can actually tell you that CD Projekt Red, well, is one of the crappiest companies that we have right now when we're talking about implementing AMD software in their games. And of course, this if they aren't huge Nvidia fanboys or even worse. But you'll get what I mean pretty soon. Let's start with a patch 2.13. Patch 2.13 for Cyberpunk 2077 and Phantom Liberty is being rolled out. It includes support for AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution 3 with frame generation. Fidelity FX Super Resolution 3. Isn't FSR 3.1 been released like 3 or 4 months ago? Anyway, that's what we get. FSR 3, not FSR 3.1, FSR 3, which is basically FSR 2.2 with frame generation. So not an improvement in terms of upscaling, only an improvement by adding frame generation. And you might say, Fabio, that's maybe a typo. It isn't. As soon as you go, for example, to the game files, you can see here, when you go to, let's say, Ratchet & Clank that supports FSR 3.1, you'll have this little DLL file called AMD Fidelity FX DX12, and this file is obligated to be in all data folders of the games that support FSR 3.1. This file has to be here because as soon as AMD, let's say, upgrades to FSR 3.2 or 3.3, 3.5 doesn't really matter, you can just go copy and paste here in the folder and upgrade the FSR version. So this is it. As soon as you go to the Cyberpunk folder, what you have is basically FSR 3 upscaler, which is once again FSR 2.2, and you have optical flow, FSR 3, FSR 2, FSR 2, FSR 2, so basically not a single mention to the FSR 3 file that is this one right now. So on top of having lower quality in terms of upscaling because it's still 2.2 plus frame generation, we can't use frame generation without upscaling because it isn't FSR 3.1. And one of the best things that FSR 3.1 brought was the ability to use frame generation without any kind of upscaling, or you can even use DLSS with FSR 3 frame generation, XeSS with FSR 3 frame generation, and so on. Added support for Intel Xe Super Sampling 1.3, so we do have an improved upscaling quality with XeSS, but we don't have an improved upscaling quality for FSR. Great, once again, great CD Projekt. It will now be possible to enable both the LLA and the DLSS ray reconstruction at the same time. So, oh man, these guys just really make me laugh. So they had like 20 updates before putting FSR 3 inside the game. Then, when we have FSR 3.1 for several months, they only put FSR 3 inside the game, basically meaning no upscaling quality improvements, in some cases even worse, and at the same time that they are doing this update, they are also tweaking the DLSS and the LAA. This is just laughable to say the least. And now look at this. We've decided to keep support for both FSR 2.1 and FSR 3 to give players the flexibility to choose their preferred settings for visual quality and performance. And the translation for this is, well, we've kept FSR 2.1 since FSR 3 is actually FSR 2.2 with frame generation, and FSR 2.2 actually sucks more than FSR 2.1 in some scenarios, and since we didn't have FSR 3.1, we're letting you choose FSR 2.1, but if you want to choose frame generation, you have to choose with FSR 2.2, which is actually a worse implementation in our game than FSR 2.1. Yeah. So firstly we start with native resolution 119 FPS, and we start with an RTX 4080 Super because that's the card that I have currently on my computer since I was testing this video passing right now on the screen with a 7900 XTX. But don't worry because we'll go to the 7900 XTX as well, and we'll go to the 6600, yes you heard it right, 6600 XT as well to see how it performs in a lower tier card. Once again, no upscaling whatsoever of 1440p ultra wide. Now, as soon as I go to the settings, we go video, graphics, in this case actually, resolution scaling, and now you have the DLSS super resolution, Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2.1, and Fidelity FX Super Resolution 3, which once again makes no sense. And then we have XeSS Super Sampling. Now, imagine that I selected XeSS Super Sampling, sorry. As soon as I go to frame generation like I do with FSR 3.1, and I want to enable XeSS with frame generation, let's say, as soon as I enable frame generation FSR3, it puts me automatically to FSR3, and then this happens. Some settings will only take effect after the game has been restarted, and this is a piece of garbage. So you can only enable frame generation if you restart the game, which makes no sense. Modders make this work like easily with one click. The DLSS frame generation worked as well, easy. With one click, frame generation would work. You didn't need to restart the game, but now somehow you do. Look, it's the same for the DLSS frame generation, which makes no sense. But well, let's start with FSR 2.1. Let's reduce the sharpness. If you look at the trees, we do have some shimmering. It is noticeable. So the shimmering is there, definitely. It is a bit harder to see because the image is a bit darker, of course, but you can see the shimmering there. It is happening. If I zoom in, of course, you can see, and it happens there on the floor as well. So it seems that it's kind of moving, kind of a mirage or something like that. But yeah, it is shimmering. As soon as we go to FSR3, that should in theory, since it is FSR 2.2, at least since it is a better implementation, since CD Projekt has been decreasing the quality of FSR 2.1 upscaling with every update. Every update that the DLSS gets better, FSR gets worse in this game, which is a bummer. And now look at this, which proves my point once again. FSR 3, and look at the trees. Massive, massive shimmering. So FSR 3 is worse than FSR 2.1 here. And look at the floor. The floor is a bit more stable, but then we have shimmering back there that we didn't have with FSR 2.1. So we have lots of shimmer, but we can't use FSR 3.1 or any other upscaling with FSR 3 frame generation because they didn't implement FSR 3.1. So once again, FSR 3, lots of shimmering. As soon as we go to FSR 2.1, the shimmering is much less, and if we look there, basically no shimmering here in the lamps as well. So in terms of upscaling, FSR 2.1 is actually better than FSR 3. The so long awaited and promised update that would finally bring frame generation to this game, and then we actually need to restart in order to apply the frame generation, which once again makes absolutely no sense. Let's use XeSS. Even in the quality mode, look at this. Perfect, no shimmer whatsoever. We do have some, of course, some artifacts there. It still seems like a mirage, but in terms of shimmering, it is much better. And if we use the ultra quality, which is the previous quality mode, 66 or 67%, yeah, it gets even better. The DLSS Super Resolution, and it's even better than XeSS and FSR with way less artifacts, okay? It is what it is. So with path tracing, we're having, with the DLSS quality, we're having 55 FPS, and look at the trees, working fine. So good, so far so good. Now let's try and go from DLSS to FSR 2.1. And with FSR 2.1, we are already seeing, well, a lot of flickering, especially since we're not using ray reconstruction, but I can only use it when using DLSS, okay, that's a bummer. Not looking that great already, but as soon as we enable the supposedly newer and better FSR 3, we have this. It's like Christmas lights. It's just insane. Why is this happening? Who made this implementation? Who made this into the game and said, well, that's fine, let's release it. After 1 year or more than that, let's release it. It's completely fine. Let's make players eat shit. Let's try frame generation, I guess. I need to restart the game. But let's try FSR 3 with FSR frame generation and see how it goes. Oh, and by the way, on top of this, CD Projekt did it once again, and now we don't have full screen mode. We only have windowed and windowed borderless. So we don't even have full screen mode or exclusive full screen mode anymore. I mean, it's like they are making the game worse on purpose. It's just insane. I mean, I can't really understand this. But yeah, FSR3 frame generation, FSR3 quality mode, and we're getting 85 FPS, 80 something. It doesn't look that great, honestly. Let me see the exact same part, and yeah, with frame generation, it makes me think that it isn't as bad, but yeah, it's still pretty bad, with lots of shimmering, as you can see. If you look at other parts, it is decent. For example, if you look at the side, it is actually okay-ish. It is okay-ish. You can play with it. We do have shimmer, but look at the rails here. Look at the mesh. Look at the trees, and we have lots of shimmer. As soon as we go to FSR 2.1, the shimmer is almost... Well, you can't perceive the shimmer as much if you look like this, for example, or this. It just isn't as bad. XeSS Ultra Quality. Yeah, everything works fine and overall much better. Modders already implemented FSR 3.1 into this game and works pretty decent, and they did it with frame generation with XeSS as well, so it's working completely fine, and yet official implementations do this crap with lots of shimmer in the trees and so on, like we saw with FSR. It's really not understandable, but well, let's try with another computer, I guess. So we're now testing in another computer with my Ryzen 9 9900X and the RX 7900 XTX. Then we go to the graphics settings and let's start enabling FSR 2.1. And let's use performance mode. As soon as we enable FSR, of course, our FPS jump to 150, not even comparable. But if you look at the foliage, we can see a bit of shimmer. Not much, because once again it's 1080p, and in this specific area it doesn't shimmer much. The base resolution is higher, but look at the foliage here in the ground, it does shimmer a lot. When we enable FSR 3, let's put it in the performance mode as well. No frame generation whatsoever, and it gets even worse. It gets even worse, as you can see. Now not only the foliage but the ground shimmers as well, which is just insane. It's completely insane and makes the game look so much worse. Look at this. How can someone implement this inside the game and say, well, we're cool to go, let's launch the update? I mean, I can't understand. This is just... Run the bullshit, go! Well, let's try now FSR 2.1 performance with normal ray tracing instead of path tracing, since it is really heavy. Let's try normal ray tracing. 80 FPS with normal ray tracing at 4K performance mode with 2.1. And once again, we do have shimmering, but it seems like it is a bit less. Now let's go to FSR 3, and once again, yes, we have more shimmer once again than with FSR 2.1.
A few moments later.
And the final test is actually with my Ryzen 7 5800X 3D and an RX 6600 XT at 1440p. And I'm running this way in order to test other performance variances that might happen, and in between other things, of course. But I really wanted to show you kind of a mid to lower tier card nowadays, how it would perform. And once again, we're running 1440p, full screen mode, graphics, and we're running FSR 2.1 with high settings, and with FSR 2.1 at 1440p we're getting quality mode, we're getting 70 FPS, which is playable in my opinion, and we do get a lot of shimmer here. As we enable FSR 3, once again quality mode, and yeah, that's basically it. we even have way more shimmering once again, but I guess that's nothing new. So with FSR 2.1 we actually have less shimmer, meaning higher image fidelity, and we slightly have the same or slightly more FPS, which is crazy. But yeah, in order to activate, we can't even enable frame generation without enabling FSR 3, which overall in terms of quality looks much worse. But well, let's see how the frame generation is handled by this card. And now we're back, since we have to restart the game in order to have frame generation working properly, which is once again a massive load of shit. Which is obviously not needed. I believe that you now need to restart the game, since they are going from full screen to windowed full screen, and that's exactly why we have to restart the game, but we didn't have it before, because before frame generation was working perfectly with just full screen mode, and it works perfectly with full screen mode with mods as well. So this is once again a big pile of crap. In terms of performance, yeah, we went from 70, I believe, 70 to 110, so not double, of course. But I was actually expecting more, because double would be 140. I was expecting something like 120, but I guess that's not the case with the GPU as slow, let's say that, as the 6600 XT. I believe that the mods did give me a bit more FPS, but I guess it is what it is. We still get 100 and something, but it isn't optimal. It should be at least 120 in that same scenario, 120, 130 I believe, but yeah, at least 120, but no, we got like 112. In terms of settings, as you can see, windowed borderless. As for the graphics settings, it is what it is, quality mode, and it doesn't look that great. Of course, if you want to enable ray tracing, that's a big no, and you can go as low as balanced, but with the amount of shimmering that we have here, and balanced sets it to 120, and as you can see, as we move, we actually have less shimmer than when we get, yeah, when we stop. And for me, this is just a bad implementation. Lots of shimmer here with FSR3. Look at the buildings there in balanced mode, and the foliage, it's just insane. As soon as we go to FSR 2.1, even if we select the balanced mode, sorry, yeah, the foliage has way less shimmer. We do have the shimmer in the apartments back there, but yeah, overall the image quality is much better, but we can't use frame generation, which is once again a garbage. So moral of the story, it seems that CD Projekt don't really know what they're doing. They're implementing FSR3 frame generation when FSR3 frame generation has been out for almost a whole year. FSR 3.1, which is the real thing for now, should be presented in the game, and it has been released like 3 months ago or so, and it is already in several games, and they are still using an older version that obligates you to use FSR frame generation alongside upscaling, so you can't use frame generation without upscaling, and at the same time they are even delivering you a worse version of FSR compared to the previous one that was there. And then they are telling you, well, we're letting FSR 2.1 here since people can choose whichever they like the most, which is bollocks, of course, which is bollocks. They could have implemented FSR 3.1, which would allow you to use FSR 3 frame generation with DLSS, with XeSS and so on, but they didn't, and now they are still letting the FSR 2.1 inside the game, because in terms of upscaling, somehow it looks better than the FSR 3 implementation that they made. So huge letdown, like yuck, no thanks. People just using FSR 3 mods right now should keep using them, because the mods work much better than the official implementation as well. And yeah, it's my dog. And so the mods work much better than the official implementation, and why not use them if they work better, and you can use them with XeSS, DLSS, whatever. So it's a win-win situation there. And there's not really much I can say. If you're using the mods, use them. If you're not using frame generation inside the game because you don't really want to test the mods, or if you don't want to really have the hassle, just use AFMF2. You're just much better with that, or lossless scaling, you're just much better. You'll have a bit more latency, of course, but at the same time, the quality will be much better, and AFMF2 and lossless scaling don't care at all if you're using upscaling or not, so you can use it with whatever settings you want, and just frame generate on top of that, which is actually pretty nice. But yeah, can't really advise it. Should you use it? For me, big no. And well guys, that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and sorry about the echo. Like I told you, this is not my studio, of course. Studio is still there and has way more echo because it doesn't have anything there. It just has like two tables there that I've put the other day, and more tables will come, then the sofas and so on, the TVs, and when everything is set up, I'll be there recording for you. For now, this is it. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video, guys. Cheers.